Can everybody hear me? Okay, I just want to get started because it's just afternoon. My name is Monica Driggers, and I'm the Senior Program Director for the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance. It's November 1st, and I am delighted to welcome you to our very first edition of Dam Busters 101 webinar series. This is a collaboration between the Mass Rivers Alliance, the Charles River Watershed Association, and the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration. This educational series offers basic information about dam removal to managers from municipalities and nonprofits that may be considering such projects in the future. Please note that the series is not intended to advocate for the removal of any particular dam or dams. There will be 11 in-depth presentations by expert speakers on different dam removal topics. For the exact schedule and more information, please visit the Mass Rivers Alliance website at www.massriversalliance.org. Today's webinar is an introduction to dam removal. Please mark your calendars for the next webinar, which is about funding a dam removal project, and that will be held on December 6th at noon. A few housekeeping items. First, this session is scheduled to end at 1 p.m. Second, please either put your questions in the chat, which Mass River staff is tracking, or hold them until the last half hour's Q&A session. Third, these webinars are being recorded. Recordings and any other webinar materials will be made available on the Mass Rivers website. Lastly, we ask that you complete the evaluation survey that will be sent to you after the webinar. And now I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Beth Lambert. Beth is the director of the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration, part of the Massachusetts Department of Fish and Game. She has 12 years of experience managing dam removal projects, and she oversees a 30-person agency whose mission is to restore and protect rivers, wetlands, and watersheds for the benefit of people and the environment. DER staff work in partnership with communities, landowners, nonprofit organizations, and state and federal agencies on projects that restore habitat and help people and nature adapt to climate change. Over the last 15 years, the division has removed over 60 dams in partnership with federal, state, municipal, and NGO organizations. Beth has 20 years of experience with river and watershed restoration in Oregon, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. So without further ado, I give you Beth.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so you should be seeing my title slide. Catherine, can you give me a thumbs up if that's what everyone?
It looks good.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, welcome, everyone. It is wonderful to see so many people here today with an interest in the dam removal process and potentially managing a dam removal project. The goal of today's presentation is to stay big picture. I'm going to give you a big picture overview of the dam removal process without going into very much detail. And that is because the rest of the sessions are specifically set up to provide detail on the various topics that I'll be introducing today. So today is really the big picture. You can think of this seminar series as being sort of like an onion, where we start on the outside layer as we are today. And then with each session, we start to kind of, peel away the layers and get into topics in more detail. So my goal for today is for you to give you a general understanding of the dam removal process, particularly the major phases, and to talk about the role of the project manager in relation to a dam removal project. By project manager, I mean the person who is charged with the leadership or coordination role. That can be someone from a municipality, could be a municipal staff person, could be a conservation agent, could be someone from a watershed group or a regional planning agency, or it could be another person altogether. And that is those people, all of you are my audience for this. I'm not speaking, not directing this towards technical experts. They will already have this knowledge. It's really more to the people like you and me who find themselves in the position of wanting or needing to take leadership and coordination for a dam removal project from start to finish. So, to sort of summarize, the two goals are to give you kind of a solid understanding of the role of that project manager, which is all of us here in the room today, and then an overview at a big picture of the dam removal process. So starting, as Monica said in the beginning, I'm the director of the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration. We are a state agency. We're part of the Department of Fish and Game. We have around 27 staff. We will be hiring several more this year. And we have a 4-person dam removal program. So we've been working in the dam removal realm since the early 2000s. And the information that I'll be sharing with you today is really based on our experience coordinating dam removal projects and then also helping others to coordinate dam removal projects. I know that we have some DER alumni in the audience here today, and it's great to know that you're out there. And I know we have a lot of new people who are new to the dam removal community. I encourage folks to put their names and their affiliations in the chat if you want to introduce yourselves to each other. But welcome to all of you. So the way I'm going to go through this is I'm going to talk about the role of the project manager, I think, first. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about dams, give you the overview of the dam removal process, and then from there we'll have discussion. Throughout this, I'll be showing pictures of various dams and dam removal projects. All right, so a little overview about dams as we're jumping in here. Massachusetts has more than 3,000 dams. This is a snapshot of a dam removal prioritization tool that we have on our website. And this, looking at it from this perspective with the various dots, really gives you a sense of how many dams we have. Worcester County, in fact, has the highest density of dams in the entire country. Of these 3,000 dams, a small percentage provide drinking water benefits. A small number, I think around 40 or 43, were built specifically for flood control and provide that purpose. A number of large regional dams and impoundments provide recreation. However, that percentage is small compared to that total number of dams. Most were built to power mills in the 1700s and 1800s. And around 70 dams have been removed in the last 15 to 20 years. It's important to remember, as we're starting to think about dams and rivers, that dams are only they're a small sort of snapshot in the life of a river. You know, dams have been on rivers in New England in particular since, you know, at most the early to mid 1600s, whereas our rivers are thousands of years old and began forming after the last ice age. So there's a long indigenous history with our rivers, and we have a lot to learn and can learn a lot to integrate into our work about indigenous interactions and uses and relationships with the rivers in New England long before dams were first built. So the first few dams were really built just to power small mills that did the work of the village where they were based. And our villages, our early settlements, grew up around those dams. And so those dams produced flour, you know, they were grist mills, they were lumber mills, they forged nails, you know, all the kind of basic stuff that the early settlers needed to exist in colonial America. Over time, of course, as the economy changed, those small dams on small rivers became larger dams that powered New England's economy and supported trade, you know, with other countries. And dams became much more larger on the larger rivers and much more established. It's worth noting that many of these dams were actually controversial when they were first built. A good example is the Billerica Dam, also known as the Talbot Mills Dam on the Concord River. And this just lays out on the right side of the slide a short history of that river. You know, no sooner was it built than there was a lawsuit filed against the dam owner for flooding upstream farmers. The dam was removed by force and rebuilt numerous times throughout its existence. And Henry David Thoreau wrote about it in 1839. He has a famous quote about shad and a crowbar related to that dam. And then Henry French made an impassioned speech to the Massachusetts legislature in 1861, talking about how for generations a painful and expensive controversy has existed in relation to this dam. So many of the first dams in communities across the state were also followed by the first lawsuit in the community. So when we reached the 20th century, we reached the era of dam abandonment. This slide shows you what some of those abandoned dams look like. They're no longer needed. They're taken out of service from mills and just sort of sat there and began to deteriorate. However, as they sat there over 100 years, our communities continue to grow up and develop around these dams. And this is relevant for the dam removal process. Many of the impoundments formed by the dams have taken on informal uses. And also, the dams themselves are very much tied into the infrastructure of our communities. They're tied to roads, they're tied to bridges, they're tied to buildings, they're tied to utility lines. And so a dam can be taken out of service for many years, yet still be linked through infrastructure and through people's everyday lives in the fabric of the community. And that creates both challenges and opportunities for the dam removal process. So now we're in this era of dam removal with many dam owners pursuing removal, which I expect that is why you are all here today. So I'm going to shift gears now from this overview of dams to speak briefly about the role of the dam removal project manager. A dam removal project manager has been described in many ways. This is a cartoon by an environmental cartoonist who lives in Finland. And to him, being a dam removal project manager is like conducting a symphony where you are cueing the various aspects of the project. You're figuring out the timing, you're orchestrating everything. You're not necessarily an expert in each of those areas, like you're not the person playing the violin, you're not the drummer, but you know the role that each component of the orchestra has to play, and you know when they come in and what they need to do, when they need to be louder, when they need to be softer, and so on. Others think of the dam removal project manager in light of these roles that I have on the slide here. In the middle is a snapshot of a notebook. You can actually buy these on Etsy, I discovered. And so this says, project manager, master of the delicate art of herding cats. And so a dam removal project manager is definitely a cat herder. A dam removal project manager has to be a problem solver and a jack of all trades. And they need to be creative and flexible and not be deterred by challenges. Often, the dam removal project manager needs to be the calm person in the room, as you can see in that yoga image in the upper right. They keep the big picture of the project and all of the steps in mind and prevent their other project team members from becoming alarmed and and help everyone kind of stay calm and focused. A project manager definitely has to juggle lots of competing priorities, as you see in the lower right. And on the lower left, they're often the person who is kind of broadcasting the plan and taking a strong sort of leadership role in guiding the project team along. So in summary, this is a more less picture-oriented, structured list of the characteristics of a dam removal project manager. And so I bring this up, you'll notice that on here, nowhere on here does it say that you must be a river scientist or you must be an ecologist. These are really the skills that you need to manage a dam removal project from start to finish. You will have subject matter experts that you work with. They will be your engineers. They will analyze the sediment for you. They will figure out the best and safest way to get the dam out of the river. Your job is really that coordinating role. You have to understand the information, but you don't have to be an engineer or a river ecologist to effectively lead a dam removal project. You need to be able to rely on the experts to help them understand what they need to do to keep everyone focused on the goals. But it's very much a generalist kind of role. So now what I'm going to do is give you an overview of what that process is that you as a dam removal project manager are guiding your team through. I want to just say again that we have set up this webinar series so that each of these steps has a dedicated webinar that will focus on it. So that is where you will get the detail. And my job today is to give you that big picture. So the big picture is that we start with a dam owner wanting to remove the dam. And for the focus of today, the sake of today and discussion, today is not going to focus on trying to persuade a dam owner to remove a dam or anything like that. Today, we're just assuming that we're all here to manage a dam removal project and that we have a dam removal in mind with an interested owner. So the first step, really, assuming you have an interested owner, is project scoping. From there, you move into a cost and feasibility assessment. From there, you move into engineering and design. Engineering and design are sort of an iterative process together with the permitting, which is the next step. From there, you get your final construction plans and permits. You go into the bid process and contracting and dam removal. Typically, the actual removal of the dam is the fastest part of this entire process. In general, a dam removal project can take 5 years. It can take longer and it can take shorter. It can take less time, but on average, probably 4 to 5 years is a good estimate of average time. So each of these steps contains a lot of information collection and analysis and working with others. So now I'm going to walk through each of these steps and tell you a little bit more about what each step entails. From there, that should bring us, looking at my watch here, just past the half-an-hour mark. Our goal for all of these webinars is to have a half-hour of presentation followed by a half-hour of discussion. So that is what I am targeting today. So moving into, assuming our dam owner wants to remove the dam, we're going to move into project scoping. Okay, so project scoping is something that you as the dam removal project manager, this is something that you can and should start doing yourself as soon as a dam removal project is on your horizon. Project scoping is a combination of information gathering and sort of strategizing. and forecasting, I would say. You're basically trying to figure out what is the scope of this project? What are the issues? What do I know about it? What might the challenges be? What might the benefits be? Because all of that is going to form the foundation for the rest of your work. On the left side of this slide, I've listed some examples of the type of information that you want to pull together. For example, you want to have clearly documented ownership of the dam, including copies of deeds and things like that. You want to look at that dam in relation to the infrastructure that surrounds it. And I have a photo in which we'll just take a quick look at that in a minute. But by infrastructure, I mean things like buildings, roads, walls, utility lines, what's around that dam, both upstream and downstream, that could be potentially affected by a removal. So you want to gather as much information on that as you can. Dams trap silt and sand and soil and cobbles and gravel. This is all referred to as sediment. The finer sediments may have contaminants associated with them. So you also want to look at what the land use history of the river is and the surrounding community upstream from the dam, as well as looking at things like DEP's databases of contaminated sites to help you hypothesize whether or not there might be contamination in the sediments trapped by the dam. You want to look at other uses of the impoundment. Are people swimming in there? Are they ice skating on there? Is there a local bird watching group that stops by there regularly? Do people fish there? Trying to track down those informal uses of an impoundment. It's helpful to gather traditional knowledge about the river from indigenous groups or individuals that you may know or that may be familiar with the river that you're working on. This provides really critical context and knowledge that plays into a dam removal project. You want to look at things like habitat benefits that would be associated with removing the dam. What type of organisms live in the river now? What critters would benefit from removing the dam? What critters might not benefit from removing the dam? And then lastly, you want to think about, in terms of sort of forecasting forward, you want to start envisioning what a dam-free river would look like and the benefits that that could bring to the community. So are there additional recreation opportunities that a removal could bring? Could there be additional fishing? Could there be a fishing platform? Could there be boating? Could there be a new public access point along the river? These are all just examples. When you start looking at your dam and learning about it, you yourself will come up with all kinds of other pieces of information that are valuable and that you'll want to include. So these are just some examples of the type of information that you would want to pull together. At this point, this is when you also start thinking about sort of the community. Who in the community would be interested in seeing the dam stay? Who might be interested in seeing the dam removed? And maybe that's putting it to black and white, more about trying to understand the variety of perspectives that community members have about the dam, I think is the most important thing. So scoping, you're pulling all this information together, and this will be the foundation of your project. This is just an example. I can see that my little graphic of the dam has moved somehow in the slide. So this is the Mill Street Dam Removal site in Pittsfield. The river is flowing from the top of the slide towards the bottom. That dotted line, those two dotted lines crossing the river are railroad tracks. And just downstream from those railroad tracks is the dam. So you, as a dam removal project manager, when you're scoping, you would get an aerial photo from Google or wherever, just like this. And you would look upstream from the dam on the aerial photo and identify, all the roads and bridges that could be potentially affected. You don't know whether they will or not. That's for the engineers to figure out. You're just trying to kind of figure out the scope, the range of topics and concerns. So in this picture, right upstream from the dam, which is just immediately downstream from those railroad tracks, you would look at, for example, the railroad tracks. You would look to see if there's any other bridges in the vicinity that could be affected. I see some buildings near the dam, so you'd be wanting to know how a dam removal might impact those buildings. I see a housing development along the river. Is there some way that that housing development could be impacted, etc.? The take home is that pulling together aerial images like this are a huge help with project scoping. So after you've scoped out your project, the next step is that you are going to want to find a qualified consulting firm that will help you do a cost and feasibility assessment. I believe we have a webinar focused on this topic, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. It'll certainly come up, I think, multiple times in our webinars on how to find a qualified firm, what you're looking for. But the gist of it is that you're going to hire a firm which is going to take all that scoping information that you gathered, and they are going to help you figure out what the major technical issues might be and how much it would cost to address them. And that is basically your feasibility analysis. What are the major technical issues and how much would it cost to address them in a dam removal project? This is also a great time to incorporate community concerns and interest. So if there's interest, or you think there could be interest, or you see an opportunity for other community benefits, this is a great opportunity to cost those out. Whether it's a boat launch, a nature viewing point, additional stormwater management near the dam, any other benefit, trail development, for example, any other benefit that you see of value to potentially incorporating into the project. You walk out of this phase with a report that lays out for you what each of the technical issues is, how it should be addressed through engineering and design, and a fairly general or rough cost estimate for the project. That allows you and the dam owner to kind of take a step back and strategize about how to move forward. This is also a good point. Anywhere around this point or just before is also the point to bring in other experts in the field that could help you. That might be a fisheries biologist from an agency. It could be community experts in the history of the dam. It could be a federal funding agency that you think might have interest in the project. So ideally, you want to gather people together that can be your either structured or informal project team to help guide you, that you can brainstorm with, and that have a knowledge both of the community and the technical aspects of the project. So you can go to your team with this feasibility assessment and say, okay, here's what we learned. Here's what it's going to cost, ballpark estimate. Here are our challenges. How do we want to move forward from here? And you develop kind of a roadmap over the next several years to get from feasibility, where you are now, through construction. So now you're going to move into step 4, which is the engineering and design process. As it's shown on this diagram, there's this kind of back and forth and give and take between engineering and design and permitting. However, I'm going to address them one at a time. Sorry, I keep forgetting I have that little excavator coming on there. So engineering and design, these are examples of some of the activities that take place during the engineering and design process. You're essentially trying to come up with an on-the-ground plan. This is the purpose of engineering and design, is to give you engineering plans that will tell the construction contractor, here's how they're going to remove the dam. And also to collect and resolve a wide range of technical issues. So, and also to provide the foundation for permitting. So that's really three goals that come out of the engineering and design process. The actual plans that tell the construction company how they're going to remove the dam, the information you need for permitting, and then resolution of technical issues. And so the bullet points on this slide are examples of some of the questions and information and studies that you're trying to accomplish with engineering and design. We have a whole webinar that is going to focus on this. So you don't need right now to know all these things or remember them. I think it's most important to remember those three outcomes that I just talked about: the actual design plans, the information you need for permitting, and resolution of any technical issues. So keep that in your mind. And then when we get to the webinar in engineering and design, that will go into these topics in much more detail. So this is just a snapshot of what engineering plans look like. They take practice to learn to read. And if you're new to coordinating dam removal or other engineering related projects, you'll want to have your engineers spend some time with you walking through how to read plans like this. Okay, so now having just spoken about engineering and design, we're now going to talk just briefly about permitting. So permitting. Massachusetts has a long history of environmental protection, and we have many, many regulations that have a goal of minimizing impacts to sensitive resources like rivers and wetlands. These regulations do a great job minimizing impacts from development and other impacts. Because dam removal takes place smack dab in the middle of the most sensitive resource areas in the state, therefore, dam removal projects require these same permits. And this is just a list of some of the more common permits that a dam removal project requires. Again, we're going to have a webinar focused on that. So I think the thing for you to remember is that there are a lot of permits and authorizations that a dam removal project needs. Permitting can take anywhere from, I would say, 9 months to a year and a half. It can take longer if there's some regulatory challenge, and it can also go a little bit faster if a project is extremely simple and very small. One of the characteristics that you'll be looking for when you're hiring your engineering firm is a firm that is experienced in permitting dam removal and similar nature-based or restoration type projects. It's a unique skill set, and so you'll be looking for companies that have demonstrated experience with that. Along with permitting, one thing I haven't touched on, but it occurs throughout the project, is public engagement. So at the time that you're doing your scoping, you also want to be thinking about what your strategy is to interact with stakeholders that might have an interest in the dam or the impoundment, and then with the larger community. And that's something that you and your project team will want to strategize about throughout the process. Permitting is the first time that there are official, structured regulatory hearings associated with the dam removal. So that is the first time that there will be, official notices in the paper or up on a website, a regulatory website, for example. And so what you want to do is make sure that you have done sort of an appropriate amount of working with community members and stakeholders before this, because no one likes being surprised by things. And so you don't want your stakeholders and neighbors to suddenly find out about this dam removal project because they saw it on a regulatory website or read about it in the newspaper. So you want to have a significant amount of public engagement take place before you get to this point. We do have a session that will focus on public engagement as well. So you come out of permitting with a set of authorizations allowing you and your dam owner to remove the dam per as outlined in the engineering plans that you've developed. From there, you are very close to construction. You update your engineering plans with any feedback you've gotten from the regulatory agencies, put the project out to bid, and then from there, it's construction and dam removal, which is super fun and exciting to be involved in. This slide also shows fundraising on the right. So fundraising is ongoing throughout this process. And once you've scoped the project, that will help you identify a fundraising strategy. So I think if I were to kind of re-articulate this slide to emphasize a couple things, I would emphasize the importance of project scoping in the beginning and learning everything you can about the project, its potential benefits, the potential infrastructure issues that we discussed earlier, because that scoping is really the foundation of leading into your feasibility study. It's the foundation of your public engagement strategy and the foundation of your fundraising strategy. So I would say that project scoping is really an important step to invest a lot of time in before leaping into hiring an engineer for the rest of the process. So just looping back here to the role of the project manager that I spoke about at the beginning. The role of the project manager then, I'm just going to quickly go back to that diagram. The role of the project manager is to keep this big picture map in their minds, adding in that fundraising and the public engagement component, and to essentially guide the project from step to step and phase to phase. They're the keeper of the knowledge, so they remember and know all of the information that comes out of each of these steps. They're often the face of the project to others, but really it's guiding the project through each of these steps and helping each of the organizations or entities involved in each step understand what their role is, what the timeline is, and what the outcomes you need are. And so you are really, the keeper of the schedule, the knowledge, the process, and have to tactfully and strongly guide the project through each of these steps. So just closing with this shot of construction, which is the reason we invest the 3 or 4 or 5 years in engineering, design, and permitting. So with that, I just want to repeat again that I'm so glad that you're here, that we have as many people as we do. And I am thrilled to be kicking off this series and very much look forward to diving into each of these topics in more detail with our subject matter experts in the months ahead. So thank you. I went a little over, however, we do have some time for questions and discussion. Do we have someone moderating the Q&A?
Yeah, thank you, Beth. There's one question so far in the chat, and everyone, again, you're welcome to write them down in the chat and we'll ask them to Beth, or if you'd prefer to ask them yourself, you can raise your hand and we can call on you. The question that's in the chat right now is if DER, Division of Ecological Restoration, has a recommended set of pre-qualifications for bid.
If the question is about firms for engineering and design, DER does have a pre-qualified list that we use, and certainly we can share that list. It's certainly not the be-all end-all of lists, but it's a starting place. So if you're interested, feel free to email me, or on our website, we have our contact list, and Chris Hirsch is our dam removal program manager. You can also email Chris Hirsch. If the question relates to construction contractors, then that we don't have any pre-qualified construction contractors.
Hey, Beth, the question was for me. I'm Ann Hausman. I'm with Hazen and Sawyer. We have worked on similar ecological restoration projects throughout the country, and how important it is to make sure that your contractor has experience with these types of very complex projects at times and sensitive projects. So the question was referring to contractors, but that is great to know that you all have that pre-qualified list of engineers as well.
Yeah, we do certainly have examples of, so typically we don't put the construction project out to bid ourselves. It's usually the dam owner, but we do have examples of language that goes into those bid packages that gets at qualifications of contractors. So and that we can definitely share from other projects.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was hoping for. Just the language that would maybe weed out the construction firms that may not have the right experience to work on these types of projects.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth. I have another question in the chat. This one is, how is the project manager that you were describing at the beginning and the scoping process affected if the dam is publicly owned versus privately owned, or is there a difference at all?
I think in terms of just purely learning about the dam, you either way, regardless of who the owner is, you want to learn everything about the dam that you possibly can, as well as again, regardless of whether it's publicly or privately owned, any informal uses that the impoundment may have. Basically, it's the same information and it's the same technical process. Where things might be different are that different owners have different approaches to public engagement. And so some municipalities, some publicly owned dams may wish to have sort of a public consensus-based decision-making process. Others may take a different approach where the town government decides that the dam absolutely needs to be removed, and they're looking more for input on specific aspects of the removal process. Whereas a private owner, if they want, they can make all the decisions themselves. They don't have to ask for public input beyond the regulatory process. However, it's in the best interest of a project manager to fully understand all perspectives on the dam, regardless of who the owner is, because people are going to take an interest, no matter what. So I think the difference really is in the public. There may be differences in the public engagement strategy, but I think the scoping is the same.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question right now?
While you're thinking of questions or discussion topics, there are some, the American Rivers website has some great resources on managing a dam removal project. They've put together different guides for different states. Massachusetts has one also. It's probably on our website still. If you Google dam removal project manager guide, Massachusetts, you will find it. And it's good, it's well written. It is from 2007. So it's old, but the dam removal process is still the dam removal process. That part hasn't changed, and the role of the project manager hasn't changed. So I highly recommend using those documents as a reference.
Thank you.
Thank
And I
you,
just
Catherine.
put the state dam removal handbook in the chat, and you're right, 2007. Beth, I'm wondering if I know we have a few folks here from neighboring states, if there's any experience you have with a dam that is on a state border or near a state border, and what other complexity that adds to the process.
Yeah, I could imagine a dam removal in one state, since our rivers, of course, go across multiple states, where dam removal in one state could affect water level. If it's right on the border, it could affect the water level upstream in the neighboring state. And what that might require in terms of coordination, I don't know. So I haven't dealt with that, but I have no doubt that someone out there in the dam removal world has dealt with that situation.
All right, we have a question from Jillian Martin. I think you can unmute now and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Your connection's pretty spotty. We can
Can you
hear
hear me?
it there.
So my question was if you had any guidance, and I'm sorry, I'm driving. I started this call on my computer, but I wanted to keep listening, so I dialed in. I was wondering, do you have any guidance on resources beyond your ecological restoration tool to help understand the ecological value of dam removal for your project? I've struggled to find like details for our location.
Yeah, it's challenging. I think that if there is a fisheries biologist that covers your region, so if you're in Massachusetts, you're within a region of the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, finding out from the fisheries biologist what they know about that river and stream can be extremely helpful. Looking up the natural heritage maps, so biomap 3, to see whether there's any known rare species or habitats that are of interest. That can be another resource. Looking at historic records can be helpful. Learning about, if you go back into like the town archives or historical society, often you can learn about the dam and the fisheries that it may have impacted in the past. So those are some initial thoughts.
Thank you, Beth. We have another question for you in the chat from Peter at Time Bond. Are there extra considerations for a dam where the downstream side is tidal or saltwater versus if it's freshwater?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question to bring up in the engineering and design session, but certainly looking at how removal of the dam would affect tidal, how far upstream the tide would be able to go, and the water level throughout the tidal cycle would be key. From an ecological standpoint, those are really unique habitats and are high priority ecologically for barrier removal, particularly freshwater tidal environments. So there's a lot to be learned sort of ecologically about that zone in relation to the dam. But from an engineering perspective, I think being able to look at how the tide would move upstream in the absence of the dam, particularly during storms, I think that would be really important.
Great, thank you, Beth. Are there any other questions right now? Put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand virtually.
Beth, I noticed that we have some people joining who are just members of the community and not affiliated in particular with anyone. I wonder who you would recommend they approach if they're interested in dam removal. Who would be the first organization or first entity they might approach when they want to start talking about dam removal?
Are you referring to dam owners particularly?
No, just members of the community who are interested in dam removal.
Yeah, I think the local watershed association or regional planning agency is a good place to start. Both of those organizations are often involved in supporting dam owners. Sometimes a Trout Unlimited chapter might be another place to start. Trout Unlimited gets involved in dam removal projects. And if they have a dam that they're sort of curious what its status is, if there's interest in removing it, they're certainly welcome to look at our project map online to see if it's something that we're working on. But there's lots of other organizations that also lead dam removal. So I think starting with the Watershed Association is probably one of the best things to do.
Thanks, Beth. And Robert, you had a question in the chat. Do you want to go ahead and ask?
Thanks, Catherine. Thank you, Beth. My question was, and I've heard a little bit about this, but it may be relevant to other people, but a lot of the rivers are, boundary lines, not only for states, but for municipalities and property boundaries. Have you had experience or when it comes to, impoundments in multiple towns or dams in multiple towns or multiple owners, how that can impact the projects?
Yeah, we've definitely had experience where part of the impoundment is in one town and part is in the other town. And so in that case, the project manager brings that to the attention of the conservation commissions in the town and the town's government early on in the process, kind of as part of scoping, so that both towns can participate and remain aware.
Thank you.
Another question in the chat about a high hazard dam that might be in an unsafe condition, but with no known owner. Forlorn dam in a tough condition. Any advice about how to proceed in that situation?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. We are seeing, municipalities working towards essentially taking those dams that are abandoned, and there's actually an established process for that. That would be something that the town would need to speak with its attorney about. The Office of Dam Safety is also developing a plan for dealing with abandoned dams. And so I think in this case, contacting the Office of Dam Safety would be the important first step, as they can provide guidance in where to go.
Excellent. It's 12:56, so we have time for one or two more questions if there are any, but we've had a great set of questions so far.
So I want to encourage all of you to look at the schedule for the rest of the sessions. We have lined up experts in each of those topics, and they will be there to give it'll be a similar format where they'll have a half hour to present and then set aside a full half hour for discussion and questions and answers. So if you have interest in engineering and design, or you're really curious about permitting, or you want to talk about public engagement, these webinars are here for you as a resource as a project manager.
And Beth, is it correct that these are happening on the first Wednesday of the month at noon?
Yes.
Excellent. So our next one is December 6th at 12, and I put in the chat the link for the rest of this series. You can see each topic and date registered there.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you very much.
All right, I think that we are at a close. Thank you so much, Beth, and everyone who joined. We really appreciate it.
Have a great afternoon.
And we'll see you on December 6th.